When you close your eyes and imagine the Great War in the Middle East, a cinematic vision likely appears. An endless stretch of golden sand glimmers beneath a merciless sun. A figure in flowing white Bedouin robes rides a camel, yet his face is pale, and his eyes piercingly blue. Behind him charges an army of fierce tribal warriors, their swords gleaming as they descend upon a Turkish railway convoy. This is Lawrence of Arabia, the legendary hero who vowed to grant a proud nation its sovereignty and battled beside them through dust and bloodshed to achieve it. This remains one of the most enduring romantic myths of the 20th century. It tells of honor and brotherhood, where the British Empire extended a generous hand to help Arab peoples cast off Ottoman tyranny. Yet this narrative contains a fatal flaw. It is fundamentally false, a magnificent, cinematic, heartbreaking falsehood. At the precise moment, Thomas Edward Lawrence sat beside a desert campfire, promising an Arab prince that Britain would champion a vast, unified Arab kingdom stretching from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. Two other men sat in a luxurious London chamber. They wore starched collars and expensive wool suits. They sipped brandy and smoked fine cigars. One was British aristocrat Sir Mark Sykes. The other was French diplomat François Georges-Picot. Between them lay a map of the Middle East, depicting territories ruled by Ottoman sultans for 400 years. In their hands, they held a grease pencil and wooden ruler. With several casual strokes and a conversation amounting to little more than imperial bargaining, they drew a line. It was a straight, arbitrary line slashing across the desert, disregarding tribal territories, ignoring river valleys and mountains. It declared simply that everything north belonged to France, everything south to Britain. They were stealing lands before victory was even secured, carving the Ottoman Empire's carcass while the patient still breathed. And they did this in absolute secrecy. Lawrence remained ignorant. The Arab princes fighting and dying in the dunes knew nothing. The world knew nothing. This is the authentic story of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. It chronicles the most consequential betrayal in modern Middle Eastern history. It reveals how a secret arrangement made over lunch destroyed Arab national dreams and created the fractured, violent, unstable region we recognize today. To grasp the depth of this betrayal, we must return to 1914. The Ottoman Empire was collapsing. When the Great War erupted, Ottoman leadership made the catastrophic decision to align with Germany against Britain, France, and Russia. For the British Empire, this was devastating. The Ottoman Empire sat directly atop Britain's imperial lifeline. The Suez Canal was the artery connecting Britain to India. If Turkish forces could cross the Sinai Peninsula and sever the canal, the British Empire would split in half. The British War Cabinet needed strategy to distract the Ottomans, to destroy them from within. They examined their maps and saw a potential alliance in Islam's heart, the holy city of Mecca. Mecca was under Ottoman control but locally governed by Hussein bin Ali, Sharif of Mecca. He was Hashemite, direct descendant of Prophet Muhammad. An elderly man, stubborn, proud, deeply ambitious. He dreamed of re-establishing a great Arab caliphate, a unified kingdom stretching from Yemen's burning sands to Syria's green mountains. British intelligence saw opportunity. British High Commissioner Sir Henry McMahon began secret correspondence with Sharif Hussein. In letters exchanged between 1915 and 1916, McMahon made a promise explicitly designed to drag Arabs into war. On October 24, 1915, McMahon wrote that Great Britain was prepared to recognize and support Arab independence in all regions within limits demanded by Mecca's Sharif. The vast majority of the Arab Middle East, including Palestine, Iraq, and interior Syria, would be theirs. McMahon was selling a dream. Hussein believed the promise. He gathered his sons Faisal, Abdullah, Ali, and Zayd. They rallied Bedouin tribes. On June 10, 1916, Sharif Hussein fired a single shot into dawn sky from his palace balcony. It was the signal. The Arab Revolt had begun. Across the Hejaz, the revolt spread like wildfire. Bedouin tribesmen descended upon Turkish garrisons. They marched north toward Damascus, believing with every step they marched toward independence. Their liaison with British military was young intelligence officer Thomas Edward Lawrence. Lawrence wasn't a career soldier but an archaeologist. He spoke Arabic fluently. He understood complex tribal politics. He held deep romantic love for the desert and its people. Lawrence met Prince Faisal and immediately recognized him as the leader the revolt needed. Lawrence embedded himself with Faisal's army. He donned white Sharif robes. He became architect of their guerrilla war. He taught them to destroy the Hejaz Railway. Lawrence truly believed in the promise. He assured Arab leaders British government's word was its bond. But Lawrence was a pawn in a game he didn't yet understand. While Lawrence lived in the desert dodging Turkish bullets, real decisions were made in hushed corridors in London and Paris. British and French governments weren't interested in Arab independence. They were empires, and empires by nature don't liberate. They conquer. The Middle Eastern War wasn't a freedom crusade. It was a land grab. British government feared that if the Ottoman Empire collapsed, another power might fill the vacuum. Britain wanted to secure the land bridge to India. They wanted ports, and increasingly, they wanted oil. So in late 1915, the Allies appointed 2 negotiators to settle the Middle East's future. Representing Britain was Sir Mark Sykes, a wealthy baronet, brilliant, energetic, famously arrogant. He viewed Arabs through paternalism's lens, believing they were children needing British Empire's steady hand. Representing France was François Georges-Picot, a hardened diplomat obsessed with Syria. He believed Syria was French property by right. The 2 men met in secret meetings in London and Paris during winter of 1915 and 1916. These were quiet meetings, often held over lunch or dinner. It was negotiation of pure cynical horse trading. They were dividing millions of people, thousands of square miles, and centuries of history, as if dividing wedding cake. Sykes argued Britain needed a land bridge. He wanted ports to serve as naval bases. He wanted railway line running from Baghdad to Haifa. And he wanted oil. Geologists were already whispering about black gold hidden beneath Mosul and Baghdad sands. Picot demanded Syria and Lebanon's coast. He wanted great interior cities: Damascus, Homs, Hama, and Aleppo. Finally, they reached compromise. They took an Ottoman Empire map and drew the infamous line. It started at Acre on Mediterranean coast and ran almost straight east across desert to Kirkuk near Persian border. Everything north of the line was colored blue, the French zone. Everything south was colored red, the British zone. Palestine was colored brown and labeled International Administration. The deal was finalized in letter signed on May 16th, 1916. It was officially called the Asia Minor Agreement, but history remembers it as the Sykes-Picot Agreement. It was a document of pure imperialism. It completely contradicted promises made to Sharif Hussein. Hussein had been promised single unified Arab kingdom. Sykes and Picot had just chopped that kingdom into pieces. Crucially, the agreement was classified top secret. Sharif Hussein wasn't told. Arab fighters weren't told. And Lawrence wasn't told. So war continued. The lie remained buried while blood continued flowing. The Arab Revolt gained momentum. In July 1917, they captured Aqaba port. It was stunning victory. Lawrence rode to Cairo to deliver news to General Edmund Allenby. Allenby supplied Arabs with gold, rifles, and armored cars. Arabs became the British advance's right flank. They moved north, destroying railway bridges. But as armies moved north, Lawrence began hearing whispers. He began sensing something rotting at Alliance's heart. Lawrence began suspecting a treaty's existence. In his memoirs, 7 Pillars of Wisdom, Lawrence wrote with agonizing honesty about crushing guilt he felt. He wrote he was effectively agent to foreign powers, exploiting Arab national hope, calling them to fight for freedom that wasn't to be theirs. But he kept fighting. He hoped if Arabs could capture Damascus before British army arrived, they would present world with fait accompli. The race for Damascus began. It was autumn 1918. The Ottoman army was collapsing. On October 1st, 1918, Arab forces entered Damascus. It was a moment of pure triumph. They raised Arab Revolt flag over government building. Damascus people flooded streets. They were cheering the end of 400 years of Ottoman rule. They proclaimed Faisal as their king. Days later, General Allenby arrived in Damascus. He summoned Faisal and Lawrence to meeting. The atmosphere was icy. Allenby informed Faisal his government wouldn't be recognized as fully independent. He told him Syria belonged to French sphere of influence. Faisal was shocked. He protested. He said he'd been promised independence. Allenby was unyielding. Lawrence looked at Floor. It was ultimate shame's moment. Broken and ashamed, he resigned and left Damascus. He returned to England, famous hero. But inside, He was broken man, haunted by betrayal he'd facilitated. War ended in November 1918. Peace conference was set for Paris in 1919. Faisal decided to plead his case to the world. He pinned hopes on Americans. President Woodrow Wilson spoke of self-determination. Faisal arrived in Paris in January 1919 wearing white and gold robes. Lawrence came out of retirement to serve as his translator. But they were walking into Lion's Den. Georges Clemenceau, French Prime Minister, was adamant he wanted Syria. Lloyd George was pragmatist with eyes on new prize. Geological surveys confirmed Mosul was sitting on massive oil ocean. So Lloyd George cut deal. Britain would abandon Faisal and hand Syria to France. In exchange, France would relinquish Mosul claim. They traded Damascus freedom for Mosul oil. Paris Peace Conference formalized mandates. France was given mandate for Syria and Lebanon. Britain was given mandate for Iraq, Palestine, and Jordan. Faisal returned to Damascus empty-handed, but Syrian people refused to accept it. Syrian National Congress declared full independence. They crowned Faisal king on March 8, 1920. France responded with brute force. They sent army under General Henri Gouraud. Arab army was small, poorly equipped. They marched to meet French army at Massillon. Battle of Massillon was massacre. French tanks wiped out Arab forces. On July 24, 1920, French army marched into Damascus. The dream was dead. Independent Arab state had lasted only 5 months. France adopted policy of divide and rule. They sliced Syria up. They carved out state for Alawites. They created Greater Lebanon, expanding borders and adding coastal cities. But these areas were full of Muslims. By expanding Christian state, French diluted Christian majority. To manage this, French created rigid confessional political system. Power was shared based on religion. It was time bomb. 50 years later, that bomb exploded into 15-year civil war. Meanwhile, British struggled with Iraq. British had stitched together 3 provinces with little in common. In 1920, Iraq erupted in revolt. Winston Churchill needed cheap solution. He decided to rule Iraq from air. When tribe rebelled, British sent biplanes and bombed villages. Second, he needed king. British moved Faisal from Syria to Iraq. Faisal had never been to Iraq. He was Sunni king imported to rule majority Shia country. British staged coronation claiming 96% voted for Faisal. It was farce. And then there was oil. In 1927, massive oil well came in near Kirkuk. British forced Iraqi government to sign agreement handing oil rights to Western companies. Iraqi government got tiny royalty. Vast wealth was siphoned to London and Paris. This theft fueled deep anger. New generation of Arabs was growing up. They looked at maps drawn by Sykes and Picot and felt humiliated. They began to dream of freedom taken by force. This led to age of coup. In Iraq, in 1958, army rose up. Revolution was brutal. Royal family was massacred. It was violent rejection of British-imposed order. But what replaced it was dictatorship. In Syria, French mandate ended in 1946. But sectarian divisions French fostered remained. Finally, Ba'ath Party seized power. Regime came to be dominated by Alawites. The Assad family built brutal police state to hold fractured country together. And then there is Palestine. Britain took control in 1920. They had made conflicting promises to Arabs and Jews. British spent 30 years trying to juggle these promises and failed. By 1948, Britain gave up and left, leaving 2 sides to fight wars still going on today. Look at today's headlines: civil war in Syria, fragmentation of Iraq, paralysis in Lebanon, conflict in Gaza. These are aftershocks of earthquake of 1916. Borders of Middle East remain borders drawn by Sykes and Picot, but they are borders that exist on paper, not in hearts of people. The story of Sykes-Picot is warning about arrogance of power. It is warning that you cannot draw lines on map and expect people to fit into them. It is warning that betrayal has long half-life. Lawrence died broken-hearted in 1935, killed in motorcycle accident. Mark Sykes died of Spanish flu in 1919. François Georges-Picot faded into obscurity, never realizing his name would become curse word for millions. But their legacy is written on map. Every time you see news from Middle East, you are looking at ghosts of Sykes and Picot. You are looking at consequences of day 2 men in suits decided they knew better than people who lived there. Middle East is not broken because people there are incapable of peace. It is broken because modern state system was built on foundation of lies. It was built on betrayal. And until people of region are allowed to draw their own map, ghost of Sykes and Picot will continue to haunt the sands.